Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Stephanie Hore. I'm a facilitator with the Center for Collaborative Policy based out of California State University, Sacramento. Today's webinar is being hosted by the Department of Water Resources, and I am here today with several members of DWR's Sustainable Groundwater Management Program. So today's webinar is an opportunity for DWR to provide a real-time orientation to the alternative submittal process as part of implementing the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. So I would first like to just quickly go over webinar instructions before I turn it over to DWR. Please also note the fact that this webinar is being recorded, and that recording will be posted onto DWR's alternative submittal website to serve as a resource to you and others during December. And so I want to go quickly over how you can provide questions and comments during the webinar. You can submit questions or comments at any point during the webinar via the questions box located there where it's being circled. And DWR staff are here keeping a queue of who is providing questions and comments, so that way when your turn arrives, DWR staff will read your question or comments aloud. Please note that today we are focusing on the submittal and commenting process of the alternatives. If you have comments or questions pertaining to the content to a specific alternative, we encourage you to follow up with DWR, and we will provide their contact information after the presentations today. We are taking only written comments only today. Those comments will be consolidated and uploaded to DWR's alternative submittal website as well. So just for some troubleshooting, if you are having trouble launching GoToWebinar and you're just calling in, feel free to contact me to obtain a copy of the presentation slides. That way you can follow along. My email address is spelled shorii@ccp.csus.edu. It's the same email address that you would have point of contact when you registered for today's webinar. And again, the webinar is being recorded though, so it will be available to you soon if you're having trouble listening or accessing the webinar. And of course, if you are having any other technical difficulties, feel free to contact me and I will help troubleshoot. And with that, I can turn it over to Trevor Joseph with DWR.
Thanks, Stephanie. Again, this is Trevor Joseph, California Department of Water Resources. Thank you for participating in today's webinar. As Stephanie mentioned, and as the title of the main slide describes, this is a webinar specifically to describe the alternative reporting system, specifically how local agencies must submit alternatives to the California Department of Water Resources. As many of you know, alternatives are due by January 1st of 2017. And so this tool is specifically designed to not only help local agencies with that submission process, but also the department in our work in reviewing those submittals after that date. So today, specifically staff will go over a series of items shown here on the slide, briefly go over an overview of the alternative requirements. But again, that's not the focus of today's meeting. Really, the focus is in agenda item 2, providing information on how to submit those alternatives. So staff will go through the submission timeline, resources that are available for local agencies in submitting this information, and then do a demo on that alternative reporting system that we've set up that will be online. And then finally go through some next steps. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen Springhorn, and he'll take us through the agenda.
All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in this morning. So as Trevor mentioned, we'll start with a brief overview of the alternative requirements, knowing that we'll touch on many of these requirements as we go through the live demo. So this will just be a very brief overview of those requirements right now. So the requirements for alternatives are found in two locations. One is section 107.33.6 of the SGMA statute. And also there are additional alternative requirements that are found in Article 9 of the GSP emergency regulations. There are three main types of alternatives. The first is an existing groundwater management plan or other plan that has been created with a law authorizing groundwater management. The second type is a adjudication, and the third type is an analysis of basin conditions that shows the basin has been operated within its sustainable yield for a period of 10 years. Now, some of the key requirements to the alternatives, local agencies, GSAs, or water masters are the entities that need to submit the alternative to the department. What they'll be submitting is a document or series of documents that show a functional equivalency to the Articles 5 and 7 of the GSP regulations. Where the alternatives apply, it applies to the entire groundwater basin, and then that groundwater basin needs to be CASGEM compliant. And that'll be one of the areas that were required, DWR is required to review as a prerequisite for alternative eligibility. And when the alternative is due, it's due at the end of this calendar year, January 1st, 2017, and then submitted every 5 years thereafter. So we wanted to pause here if there are any questions on this quick overview of the alternative requirements. And again, we'll be going into more depth on these requirements during the live demo. Okay, looks like we don't have any comments or questions right now, so we'll keep moving along. So the next portion of the talk will be on the actual alternative submittal process. So we'll talk about a high-level timeline of the key steps, and then get into the local agency resources and public resources with the live demo. So the alternative submittal process, the first step is the local agency or entity submitting the alternative to the department by the statutory deadline of January 1st, 2017. That will initiate a 60-day public comment period on that alternative, which will be facilitated through the online tool we'll go over in just a bit. And then step 3 will be DWR's evaluation of alternatives, and that will take some time. And then step 4, local agencies are required to submit their first annual report related to the alternative April 1st, 2018. And then 5 years down the road, January 1st, 2022, the cycle repeats where the updated alternative needs to be resubmitted to the department. So now we'll touch on some resources we have available for the public and local agencies or water masters. The first is our alternative submittal website. This is an informational item that allows you to gain information on what the alternative requirements are, how to submit the alternatives, and this will be the website that has the link to the online the alternative submittal tool. The next piece of information that might be useful for local agencies is our water management planning tool. This allows you to interactively analyze different boundaries, adjudicated basins, basin boundaries, basin prioritization, and there's a number of others that might be useful as you finalize your alternative. But what we're here to talk about today is really the DWR alternative reporting system, and this is where you go to submit your alternative. And so there's two main components to this system. I should mention very quickly that this system will be housed on a new SGMA portal the Department of Water Resources has created that will be the place that you go to submit and view SGMA information. And so the alternative submittal system is just one of many that are tools that will be housed at this website. So the alternative reporting system on that SGMA portal allows for public access of the information of submitted alternatives. There's a table form and a map interface that shows the submitted alternatives and an area to provide public comments. And then the second main component is the local agency or entity access. This is where you'll go to create an account and log in and submit your alternative. So now we'll get into the live demo, but first I wanted to, before we go into the different components of alternative submission, we'll touch on 3 demos today. The first is how to create a user account. The second will be how to submit your alternative. And then the third will be public comments, how the public or anyone can comment on your submitted alternative. So the first demo will be how to create a user account. And so I'll just, with all these demos, I'll start with the overall workflow, and then we'll go in and look at the live demo. So what you'll do is, to create an account, is you'll click on the register link on the website that we'll show in a second. Then you'll get an email asking you to activate your account, and then once you've activated your account, you'll be asked to set a password, and then you'll have full access to the alternative submission system. So where to find the create account link? That's on the SGMA portal and shown in the red arrow there up at the top left or right. And then there's also an area to register from the alternative reporting system webpage. So now we'll move over to a live demo and we'll look at how to create an account. So I'll create the account from the SGMA portal, and again, let me just do a quick overview of the SGMA portal. And this will be, it's available now online. I'm using a demo site right now. It's online on a public website, but will be fully operational by close of business today. So our SGMA portal is, as I mentioned, where you go to submit and view SGMA information. We're working on a number of tools, such as the GSA formation tool. This is where the GSP submittal will happen. Today we're talking about the alternative submittal, and then the adjudicated area annual reporting requirements. That tool has been brought into this portal as well. There is some additional information on what this portal offers to the public and local agencies, and the ability to ask for more questions if you have those. So now we'll create an account. So you click the create an account, you put your name, email, and your organization. And an important point here is that your email address will be your user ID to log in. So once you put that information in, you'll click register, which will send you an email to this email address. In your inbox, you'll click on the activation link, which will then, you'll set your password, and then you're ready to log in. So now we will move on to the next demo, which will be submitting a new alternative. So again, we'll start with just a high-level overview of the workflow. You'll log in with your login that you just created. You'll click a submit button, so to create your new alternative submittal. You'll enter your submitting agency name, and we'll talk more about that. Fill in the information required for the alternative form. You'll save it, and then you'll submit it. So we'll walk through those steps. So from the SGMA portal homepage, if you click on the alternatives link, you'll come to the alternative reporting system. And again, there's 2 major components to this. One is the public access, a table of submitted alternatives, and then a map interface that shows those submitted alternatives. What we're talking about right now, though, is local agency access. So we'll sign in to our account. Okay, so this is where you start the process, and when you start the process, you'll come in here and submit a new alternative, and when you've already submitted or you've started an alternative, it'll show up in this table here. So you can log into this system, work on a few elements of your alternative, save it, log out, and come back and start where you left off. So you don't have to submit all the information all at once. You can come back if you need to. So we'll start with a new alternative. So an important point here is that when you are submitting an alternative, if it's just one local agency submitting an alternative, you'll be described as the submitting agency. And this is important if there's multiple local agencies that are party to an alternative. There needs to be one agency that takes the leadership role to submit the alternative. But we'll talk about how all the parties to the alternative will be notified at the different steps of alternative submittal. So you'll type in the submitting agency name. So this is a smart field. So if you start typing in information here, a water district, if you're an existing water district, your name will show up in this table, so you can select that. But since this is a test, I will just use a fictitious name and create an alternative submittal. And this is just asking you, are you sure you want to use this name? And you click through. You've successfully opened or started your alternative submittal process, which then brings you to the online form. There's a series of questions and information we're asking for as you submit your alternative. The first is you have to select a plan manager, and the plan manager is the point of contact between the alternative, the entities submitting the alternative to the department. And so throughout this tool, if there's a little question mark here, it provides more information on what the plan manager is, and if you hover over this, it gives you information. So we'll select a plan manager. I'll just use an existing one. You can select from existing plan managers if you've already put them in. You can create a new plan manager by putting the first name, last name, email, and other information and saving that. The next step is to tell us if this alternative is being submitted on behalf of just one agency or multiple agencies. So if multiple agencies are party to the alternative, but only one is submitting, the remaining local agencies will be documented here. You can add their information. Into this field. And then you're able to give that agency a contact information. By adding the first name, last name, and email address of that contact person. Okay, so once you've done that, one thing I should mention is that when you enter a point of contact for the local agency that's party to the alternative, you set that point of contact here. So what that does is it sets the point of contact for that local agency to get email correspondence regarding the steps in plan submission and if there's any public comments that are received. And we'll go more into that. Okay, so that means that this alternative has two local agencies that are party to it. It has the local agency that's the submitting agency that's actually submitting the alternative to the department, and then the 123 water company that's party to it. The next piece of information, and I should mention that these red asterisks are required fields that we need to have information in each of these, And if you go to submit the alternative and you don't have information in these required fields, it will not allow you to submit it, and it will give you a message on what is needed to be filled out. So the next requirement is to explain how the submitting agency has determined that the alternative satisfies the objectives of the Act. This could be uploading a board resolution, this could be uploading notice of intent to submit the alternative, but some official document that shows that the local agency it wants to submit this alternative. So that's where you can upload a document. So to upload documents, this will be a common theme or process throughout this form. You can click on anywhere in this box here, and it opens up a file folder where you can go and browse to the files that you need, and it'll upload the file here. You can provide a description of what that uploaded document is. The next question is the submitting agency or other agency party to the alternative a GSA or planning to form a GSA? You can see that this is not a required field, but this is more informational for us and for the local agencies that might be surrounding the alternative, just to see what type of path that you'll be taking through SGMA implementation. So there's a number of options here. Yes, it's an existing GSA. If you click on that, you type in the name of the GSA. There's a yes, they plan to form a GSA in the future, or no, a GSA is not planning to be formed. So you can move on to the next page by saving and continuing. And again, as I mentioned, at any point, if you want to sign out, you can, and you'll come back and all your information will be saved. Okay, so now on to the next part of the form. This is where you will enter your alternative information. The first required item is you select the basin that you are submitting your alternative for. And here's just a helpful link if you want to see what that basin that you've selected looks like or where it is. This allows you to see it on the map, and there's a few other layers here that you can turn on and off. So that just allows you to make sure that that's the basin that you've selected. Now, question B2 is, this is where you select the alternative type that you plan to submit, and this is where you'll submit your alternative. So as I mentioned, there's three main types. An existing plan. So this is where you would upload that plan and describe what the document or documents are here. This is option 2 is an adjudicated action. This is where you would upload that information. And option 3 is an analysis of 10 years operating the basin in a sustainable yield. So this is where you'll upload your alternative, and if you have multiple attachments, if there's a main alternative document with multiple attachments, you can upload as many documents as you want here. And you'll see them. You can remove the file if you want, if that was the wrong file. So that's how you upload documents. The next question is, please describe how the alternative covers the entire basin. So this is a requirement in the GSP regulations that the alternative covers the entire basin. This is the opportunity for the local agency to tell us how your alternative covers the entire basin. So you can either upload a document that tells us that, or you can write in a description here as well. So it's an either or. The next question is providing the names of the existing CASGEM monitoring entities that are within the basin that the alternative is being submitted for. So this is where you just type in the CASGEM monitoring entity names. There can be multiple. You just type them all in, and this helps the department understand which monitoring entities are in this basin. The next question is providing any environmental documents or documentation that the local agency has developed regarding the alternative, if applicable. So this is where you can upload documents if you have them here, or you can use an environmental information form that we've developed for you if you don't have your own. And this is just a brief form for you to fill out if there has been any environmental activity related to your alternative. So now we'll save and continue on to the last page. So what this will show you, and we'll get to a question session momentarily. So I know I've been talking for a while, but we'll get to questions in just a few minutes. So what you'll see on this last page is all the uploaded documents that you have here. The last question is to upload an alternative elements guide. So what this is it allows you, the local agency, to show the department where your alternative document or documents meet the elements of the Articles 5 and 7. So there's two options here. You can upload your own if you've already developed this as part of your alternative, or we've provided an alternative elements guide that you can use. So there's some information on what the purpose of this guide is. It's optional to use this guide. If you already have your own, you can use your own. But it has all the elements of Articles 5 and 7, and you can put in the attachment or attachments where that element resides, and then which section or page number that information is, where it is, or if it's not applicable, a brief description of why it's not applicable. So we'll upload that. And then if you wanted to, you could put in a description of your own guide to the alternative report. And again, this facilitates the department's review of the alternative. It zeroes in on where those requirements are in your plan and helps us understand them. So once you've uploaded all this information, you can click Save, and then you can go on to submit your alternative. And then, as I mentioned, if there's anything that's left out, it'll tell you where that is. So Section A, submitting agency contact, is incomplete. So we'll go back there. We will finish that. Then save and continue. And then we're able to submit our alternative. It just gives you a brief confirmation notice. Yes, I want to submit my alternative. And then it gives you an indication on the alternative has been successfully submitted to the department. The point of contacts and the plan manager will receive an email that has taken place. And then you'll have complied with submitting your alternative to the department. And you'll see your submitted alternative right here in your list of my alternatives. So a few things I want to show just before we open it up for questions. If we go back to the home page of the alternative reporting system, as you start this process, we have developed a alternative template. So it just gives you an idea of what the questions we're asking for. So you can click on this, print it out, and then provide it to staff or have it in meetings that allows you to coordinate your alternative submittal. Just just for its more reference information. Okay, with that, we will open it up for questions. We'll go back to the slideshow and just remind you that this is how you submit questions, and it looks like we have a few questions so far. Okay, go ahead, Tim. Tim Godwin will be reading out the questions and we'll answer them.
Great. Yep. So we have a handful of questions here. They're all good questions. I'd like to roll through them and get some responses from you guys here. So on question 4, so back to the tool, it might be nice to look at some of this. Is it B4?
Okay.
Question is, what if there are some who are already a GSA and some who plan to be a GSA in the future? In terms of, are you planning to, or are you already a GSA?
Yes, so that's where you could describe that here, or you could say that yes, there are existing GSAs in the basin. You could give them a name, and then you could say, you could describe that scenario that other areas might not have a GSA, or other areas are planning to become a GSA. So that description would go in this dialog box right here.
Great. And then to piggyback on that, the question is, are we requiring the identification of whether or not you're forming a GSA?
No, we are not. Again, this is just informational for us as a resource or for local agencies. Again, the required fields to submit an alternative are indicated by this red star or asterisk. So you can see that these are the required fields or questions above. This question in particular is not required.
Okay. To get to some, I guess, more programmatic questions here, we have a couple that are similar. If an alternative covers 2 subbasins, do you have to submit it twice, once for each subbasin?
Yeah, the answer to that is we would like to see it submitted for each subbasin so that we have kind of consistent and clear coverage in terms of kind of one submission for each subbasin. So that is preferred.
Great. I guess the next here is a question for us as to what we can provide publicly. Can you please make the alternative plan elements spreadsheet public so it can facilitate public review as well as DWR? So what's the, I guess, the public nature of the documents being submitted in the tool? How available is this information?
Yes, so I guess the first question is the alternative elements guide is a public document and will be posted on our website, or you can see it, you can download it from our website, so that it'll be publicly available. The information that's publicly available pertaining to each alternative only becomes publicly available after the local agency has submitted the alternative. So as soon as the local agency has submitted the alternative, it will become publicly available, and it will show up in, let me sign out here. It'll show up on this list of submitted alternatives, and this is where you can go in and see all of the submitted information. Click on the attachments, read the descriptions, and see which basin it's for.
Great. I guess more of a technical question. Are there any file size limitations for uploading documents to the tool?
Great question. I'm not aware of any right now, but I would suggest I will check into that, and if you could send me, Stephen Springhorn, an email directly, I'll get back to you with that information, and we'll post that information on our website so everyone knows if there are any file size limitations. That's a great point. And my email will be on a slide at the end of this presentation.
You have more to add here? Okay. So I'm going to take a step back. We asked a previous question about submission for two subbasins. A little twist on that question. Can two adjacent basins be placed in one alternative plan?
So the answer is yes. And so it's kind of interrelated with that other question. We do want each subbasin having a separate submission, but it can be the same document. And you could indicate, I mean, if you've already developed your alternative, it's a report. It's somewhat integrated in terms of how it's presenting information for two different subbasins. You do not need to separate that document out per se. You could submit that same document for both subbasins, but indicate, obviously when you're going through the question, it will require that you indicate, which subbasin is being covered through the submission of that document. So you can use the same document if it's already been prepared to cover multiple subbasins, but we do want each subbasin submitted as a separate submission so that we can more easily track comments and track just the evaluation by subbasin.
Great. Comments or questions keep streaming in. Just to touch on that, we may not get to each of these in response verbally, but we will get back to you specifically in email if not during this webinar. So I guess the next question is, I got to scroll up a little bit here. If a local agency has hired a consultant to work on the alternative, can the consultant submit the alternative on behalf of the agency?
Yes, that could happen. I think the approach there would be the local agency would give the consultant the credentials to log in to the system to fill out the information, but we want to make sure that the alternative that's being submitted to us is an official act of the local agency, that the local agency supports the submission of that information. There might be some additional response to that question from our legal counsel, Scott Morgan.
All right. I will offer additional comments. Someone can be delegated to submit the document. Certainly, we don't expect the board, sitting as the board, to sit there with the computer and submit the document. So they're going to delegate it to somebody. But the decision, there has to be some documentation that the official decision-making body has considered this and decided that this is an adequate alternative to a plan, because that's what the law requires. So we need to know that the decision-making body has considered that and said, yeah, this is good. So you go ahead and finish it up and send it off, and they can delegate that to a staff member or a consultant, to anybody.
Okay. How will this tool permit changes or updates after submittal?
Good question. So that would be, you would just log back in to your alternative, and you would be able to edit information that either the department is suggesting that it be edited. But again, when you go to submit your alternative, the final submission, we're under the impression that all the information that you provided before you submit is accurate and contained in this alternative. However, if you submit it before the deadline and want to go change it, you can change it. Those changes will be documented in the system and publicly available. But after the deadline, the system will be locked until the department starts its review.
Great. A question pertaining to submitting multiple types of alternatives here. On the choose alternative type question, what if an alternative submitter wants to submit its alternative document under two different categories, namely one, the AB 3030 plan, and two, an analysis showing the basin has been operated within sustainable yield for 10 years. Do you have to submit the alternative twice?
Yes. And so what you would do is you would come into the online system, and this is an example here where you would go through you would create a new alternative, and you would select whichever option of alternative you want, say the AB 3030 plan. You'd put that information in. You'd submit that alternative. Then for the other type, you would start another alternative. So you'd submit a new alternative, and you would then put in the other option of alternative and that information in here. So you'd be the same local agency, but you will have two alternatives submitted. And that functionality has been incorporated into this tool. So you can have multiple alternatives for one local agency and one basin.
And it would be also good to know if you're submitting the same alternative twice as the AB 3030 plan and an analysis, indicating which alternative you would like the department to evaluate first. I think it would be important for us to know what which one you're interested in understanding our evaluation on initially.
Okay. And kind of back up to a more programmatic question. Might DWR ask for additional information, clarification or other, after alternatives are submitted? Or will alternatives be evaluated based solely in the information provided at the time of the submission?
So this is another good question. The alternatives will be evaluated as the groundwater sustainability plans per Article 6 of the GSP emergency regulations. And we, the department, can evaluate plans and alternatives and ultimately come up with 3 different outcomes, whether it's approved, inadequate, or incomplete. What incomplete means, just in paraphrased real quickly, is if the department sees that the submission has potential to reach an adequate determination, the department can prepare an assessment and corrective actions requesting potentially additional information in order for evaluation. I think others may want to add to that.
Yeah, this is Scott Morgan again. I suspect the scope, we don't have a sense of the scope of additional information that the department might request in the case of alternatives, but it's going to be less than in the case of plans, in part because there's a deadline for the plans or the alternatives, and that's coming right up, and there's really not a chance to go back and modify, for instance, AB 3030 plans, except for in the low and very low priority basins. So there's not as much flexibility with alternatives as there will be. Certainly you can't change the past for the ones that are sustainable management. And so there's a chance for the department, if we see something missing that we need, but it's not that the submission was incomplete, but there's something that we believe that you have that we can request. That's one thing, but again, I think it's going to be different from the more iterative process of GSPs.
Okay. Again, programmatic. Why will a first report be due in 2018? We were under the impression that the alternative submittal by January 2017 will contain all necessary information and that the next report would be due in 5 years.
Yeah, so the annual report, we evaluated where we'll be with the review of these alternatives, and it's likely that the alternative submission itself will contain a lot of information to support what's happening within the, certainly, especially if it's the 10 years of sustainability, but we also request an understanding of current conditions. So the reality is that if the report were due this coming April, that there wouldn't likely be any more or substantial more information than what is already going to be in the alternative in some cases or in many cases. So, and that the fact that the review process will likely still be occurring that portion of this next calendar year, it is determined that the most useful way to approach that requirement is having that first annual report due in February or April 1st of 2018.
And then this is Stephen, if I could add, if the question is also on why an annual report is needed to be submitted, that's because in the GSP regulations for alternatives, we state that the alternative has to be functionally equivalent to Articles 5 and 7. And Article 7 contains the annual reporting requirements in the GSP regulations.
Okay, I think this is our last question, and before we continue on,
Okay.
If DWR's review results in the need for updates, how will those be permitted, and will they be documented within this tool?
Yes, they will be documented in this tool. So any changes after the due date for alternatives will be documented in the tool.
Okay, so here's the next. Due to the expedited timeline, there may not be sufficient time to get a resolution from our board before the submittal deadline. Could that follow in January?
No, we need something by the deadline that represents the decision of the decision-making body, whatever that is.
Okay, another question. When will the alternative elements guide and template be available? Will DWR be publishing any other guides related to alternative submittals before the submittal deadline?
Regarding the alternative elements guide, that will be part of the online system that is available, will be available this afternoon. It will be posted. We'll also post it on our alternative submittal website. That might take till Monday to have it posted there. So by Monday, the information you're describing will be posted in multiple locations on our website and our Sigma portal.
All right. As a follow-up to the board resolution, if the board had an agenda item that awarded the contract to the consultant for the preparation of the alternative, is that sufficient? In front of it.
Oh. There we go. No, awarding the contract isn't a decision of the agency that the alternative is a substitute for a plan. It's a decision to award a contract to generate an alternative. At some point, the decision-making body is going to have to take a look at what the alternative is going to be submitted and say, we agree this is a suitable alternative to a plan, and then that can be submitted. And again, we don't dictate to the local agency what process they follow to do that. Whatever their internal process is, whatever their review process is, as long as they follow that process and they indicate to us that this is the process we have for making decisions like this, and this is who we've delegated authority to do certain things, and these are the decisions that have been made, they represent the decision of the board, then that's fine.
Okay, I think we'll read one more and then continue on.
Okay.
Under the alternative, a report must be stamped by a registered professional. Does the 10-year analysis need to be stamped as well?
Yes, that is required to have a professional engineer or professional geologist stamp the 10-year analysis or that option of alternative. That's a requirement that's in the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, Section 107.33.6.
Okay. One more. Where in the regulations is the requirement for board resolution?
So I think, Scott answered this it's really the local agency's process to make decisions of this type. Whether it's a board resolution, is it a decision by a GM or other acting individual that has the authority to authorize the submission of this alternative is the information that's necessary. So we're not suggesting that it's a board resolution per se. It's the process and the documentation of the submitting agency as to they have the authority to submit this document, this type of document to the department.
And again, the law requires that the alternative be something that the local agency believes to be a suitable alternative to a plan. And so that indicates that the decision-making body has had to consider this and make a decision about it. However they do that, again, this is up to the local agencies to decide how they go about this process, but there is that requirement in the law, and not in the regulations, but in the statute.
Okay, again, if your question wasn't answered directly here, we will be reviewing all of those that we have received and responding via email, if not here verbally. So I think we'll continue now, Stephen.
All right, thanks, Tim. Okay, so now we will move on to public comments, and we'll start with an overview of the public comment process. So the workflow is opening the alternative reporting system, selecting an submitted alternative that you plan to comment on, filling out the comment form, and then submitting that form. So now we'll demonstrate that in the tool. So as I mentioned, there's two components of the alternative reporting system. One is the public access of information that does not require a login, and the other is the local agency access that does require a login. So for posting a comment on a submitted alternative, you do not have to log in. You just come to this website, click on this table of submitted alternatives, click on the alternative that you're interested in commenting on. You see it in this list. You press comments. That will show you a list of all the comments that were received on this alternative. To add a new comment, you push the button in the upper left and it opens up a dialog box. Put your name, email, you could either type in your comment here, and then there's the ability to choose a number of a file or more files if you have your comments in a document. And then you hit submit. We'll just do this as a test. It informs you that after submitting, your comments will be viewable by the public and will not be able to be edited. If you want to proceed, yes. That comment shows up. And when an alternative receives a comment, the plan manager and point of contacts that were put down in the alternative submittal will get an email notification that a comment has been added to their alternative. So that is the public comment process. We can open it up for any questions on the public comment process. It's pretty simple, easy, and you do not have to you don't have to log into the system to comment. Related to the public commenting, if to comment on an alternative, you go to this table view. But if you wanted to see on a statewide level where the alternatives are being submitted or have been submitted, there's this map that shows that will show the submitted alternatives. And if you click on a particular basin, you can click to get that information that's contained in the alternative. Okay? So again, we'll open it up for any questions on public comments.
Okay. So the first question is, will DWR have any filter or take down inappropriate or factually incorrect comments?
At this time, we do not plan to curate the comments. The comments will be submitted and they'll be posted. There's the opportunity, if a local agency felt that it was erroneous information, the local agency could provide a comment in rebuttal if needed. But we do not plan to filter any comments.
Okay. Does the public comment process allow for uploading a document with comments?
Yes. So we'll show that functionality. So if from our Sigma portal page or the alternative reporting system, you click on the submitted alternatives. You pick the submitted alternative that you want to comment on. Press comments. You'll see all the submitted comments, and then you add new comment, put your name in here. And you can provide a description here, but the question was, can you upload a file? Yes, you can. You can upload whichever file you need. You submit it, and then that document will be publicly available for the public to see.
Great. Next question. Why are the plan managers contacted when a comment is made?
Well, I think it's important that it's a transparent process, regardless of, as it relates to obviously the submission of the plan, as well as the comments. So I'm not exactly sure the specifics of that question, but we want to make sure that all information relevant to that alternative is posted and clearly denoted on our website.
And also, it is a requirement in the GSP regulations that the commenter provides the comment to the department and to the agency they're commenting on. And we just felt that this facilitates that process, so the commenter doesn't have to reach out to the local agency if they don't want to. It goes straight to the local agency as part of this online system.
And with that in mind, the manager who's submitting this may want to create a special email address just for that, if they expect to get a lot of comments and don't want to have to look at them all.
Well, all those comments will be housed on this online tool.
But we're going to send them an email, right?
They will get an email.
Right.
Yes.
So for that email address, they may want to just have a special one for that, so it's not clogging up their usual work email, if they expect a lot of comments. But that's up to them.
Great. How will you, I assume the department, consider public comments during your review period?
Well, as we talked about many times with the development of the regulations, public comments are certainly part of the process to evaluate whether or not the plan, elements of the plan in the basin. It's important for the department to get information that can help us understand the basin-wide sustainability. So the alternative is being evaluated, but as we talked about during the regulations, public comments, especially comments that are more technical in nature and that can help with the understanding of the sustainability of the basin are valuable to the department so that we can get a potentially a full understanding of the local conditions. And specifically in the GSP emergency regulations, we call out in Article 6 the evaluation criteria. One of the criteria is whether the agency has adequately responded to comments that raise credible technical or policy issues within the plan. So it is one of the evaluation criteria in terms of how we look at plan. And again, that Article 6 is relevant to GSPs and alternatives. So it's built into the regulations.
Okay. What if an agency has already opened up their alternative GSP submittal to public comment?
That's a good question. I think what could happen is that once the alternative is submitted onto our online system, those comments could be added to their alternative through this process we just illustrated here. So if the alternative that's submitted already has public comments, the local agency or the people who have already provided public comments could come in and add them here. So there's a full record of the existing public comments.
Okay. Will there be a way moving forward for an individual to pre-sign up to be notified that new documents relative to an agency or a submittal or a subbasin have been received and can be reviewed on the submittal site? For example, I may wish to be notified when any report or comment is submitted by someone else for the Tule subbasin.
So I think that might blend the lines of the interested parties list and this process. So there are just a few email notifications that are going to be part of this alternative submittal. As I mentioned, when an account is created, and we'll get into this in a subsequent slide, but if an individual is interested in what's happening in a basin, that individual can contact the local agency and get on an interested parties list.
Okay. A comment we just received regarding the file size question of what you can upload. Currently, they can be up to 700 megabytes, so a fairly sizable document. Just received that from Mark. That'll help.
Great. Thank you, Mark.
So kind of a longer question, specific question, I'll try to paraphrase it, in regards to 4 entities coming together to submit an alternative, and the question regards to whether or not a letter signed by each would satisfy or suffice for the submittal. And that's a hard question to answer. It really gets down to what is the process of those entities, because I think this question is regarding or related to kind of the authority to submit an alternative. It really gets down to what are the local agency process. Is that process sufficient to in regards to do they have the authority to submit that alternative? So it's really up to the local agencies to follow their process as it relates to submitting that information. Our goal is to make sure that the local agency that's submitting has the authority to submit it, that it's not kind of a rogue action on the part of the local agency, that they have the necessary approvals to do so.
Okay. Must comments be restricted to the type of alternative plan? For example, sustainable yield during a 10-year period.
No, there's no restriction on comments. The comments can be on any portion of the alternative or information that's submitted as part of the alternative. And that same process of submitting public comments would be used for any comment on the alternative.
Okay, a question regarding the file uploads again. Can they upload GIS files? The concern there is many times GIS files can be greater than the maximum size.
So I guess if the GIS files are being uploaded by the local agency, those can definitely be put into one of those upload boxes in the tool. If the GIS files are being uploaded as part of a public comment, again, GIS files can be uploaded as part of a public comment. If we do run into a problem with a file size limitation, which is 700 megabytes, we can please contact the department, either myself or Trevor Joseph. Our emails are right here, and we can find a workaround. There are other avenues we could use.
So next question, it states here, my understanding that a groundwater management plan, AB 3030 plan, can no longer be prepared for high and medium priority basins. However, can be updated if being submitted as part of an alternative. Is that correct? Well, we don't want to interpret water codes, but specifically, I remember seeing language along that type that if that form of an alternative were approved, then folks can update that plan. Certainly, that would seem to be the intent, that that's a document that is robust enough, if in fact approved by the department, that you can continue to use that document. So, but look specifically at the Sustainable Groundwater Management law as it relates to the specific terminology, adoption and updating, and how that's articulated in law.
Okay, I think that concludes our questions for this period. You have some wrap up for us, Stephen?
Yep. So we'll touch on a few other elements of the system. One piece that will be useful if you forgot your password. There's a lot of passwords out there that many people have. There's a way to recover your password, and just a real quick summary. You click on the forgot password link. It'll send you an email, and you can recover your password or set a new one in the email that the system sends you. So just real simple thing, but might be useful. That forgot password is up by the sign-in box on the main Sigma portal page and on the alternative reporting system page. So a few other items we'd like to talk about is that I mentioned email notification will be provided for certain actions that take place as far as alternative submittals. So this table just shows you who will get emailed for the various actions that will take place through this process. So when you create an account, the person creating the account will get an email, and DWR headquarters office for the Sigma branch will get an email initializing a new alternative. The person doing that at the local agency level will get an email, as well as DWR HQ and our region office representatives. And then submitting an alternative, everyone being the plan manager, points of contacts, and DWR representatives will be emailed when an alternative is submitted, resubmitted, or when a public comment is received. And again, this information will be on our website. These slides will on Monday, if you have any questions. So next steps, the online system will be publicly available. The full operational system will be publicly available on Monday, December 5th. It is online right now, but the full operation version will be online Monday. The deadline to submit alternatives will be January 1st, 2017. Following the submission of an alternative to DWR, that will start a 60-day public comment period. An important note is that if an alternative is submitted before January 1st, 2017, the 60 days starts from when the alternative is submitted to the department, not from January 1st, 2017, if it's before that date. And then finally, the April 1st, 2018 deadline for the first annual report related to the alternative needs to be submitted to the department. So our last slide here is just contact information and additional resources, web links. So in Sacramento office, Trevor Joseph and myself, Stephen Springhorn, you can email us if you have questions on what you heard today or other questions regarding alternatives. I would suggest you also contact DWR regional offices. We have representatives in our northern office, north central office, south central office in Fresno, and southern office in Glendale. And then the links provided there are to the alternative submittal website that will house a lot of this information, a link to the alternative reporting system, and then if you're not already on our email list, please sign up for that because we'll have important information related to alternatives, but also general SGMA information that gets posted on that. And then the last link is our SGMA water management planning tool. It's again just an informational interactive map that might be useful for local agencies. So with that, we'll close the presentation portion. We could answer any other questions if they do come in. So I'd like to just thank everyone for attending today. And we'll wait a little bit to see if there are questions that come in.
Well, one question came in, I'll read it here. What type of feedback might agencies expect resulting from DWR's evaluation of the alternative? Is it simply an accept, reject response, or if rejected, might their information provided about why or where the submission was deficient? So I think we kind of answered this one. Again, we're going to evaluate alternatives as required in Article 6 of the GSP emergency regulations. And so the review process will follow that same process of the GSP plans, and we can deem a alternative or a GSP inadequate, approved, or incomplete. And there's a process there if we call it incomplete. So please look at that section of the regulations closely. Next question, and we get this one a lot. Is there an anticipated time for DWR's evaluation of the alternative plans? Good question. And the bottom line is not right now. We need to see kind of the number of alternatives, the complexity of the information provided. So at this time, we are not giving any definitive timelines on the review of the plans.
All right, it looks like we don't have any more questions that have come in.
Do you have one clarifying question from?
Oh, it looks like one might have just come in.
So a question, without a timelining on the review of a plan, how should agencies deal with the impending GSP deadlines? So read the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act closely. There is some additional time allowed for local agencies to address GSA and GSP requirements if the department deems alternatives essentially inadequate. So that is something that local agencies will have to kind of take into consideration. Is that enough timing to address what they would need to do with GSAs and GSPs, or do they want to start planning for kind of different outcomes as it relates to all alternative plan? We can't really provide guidance on that but it is something I can see local agencies having to kind of think about. But please look at SGMA closely, because there is some extension of time, if you will, for agencies to complete GSAs and GSPs if alternatives are deemed inadequate. Another question, can an existing groundwater management plan be updated prior to the submission as an alternative, or only after submission as an alternative, and if it is accepted by DWR? You know, to be honest, I can't answer that question. I would need to look at the act a little closer. I do remember, though, that I believe the groundwater management plan cannot be updated or adopted in a high and medium priority basin after January 1st, 2015, if my memory serves. So we'll have to perhaps follow up with that specific on that specific.
All right, it looks like we don't have any other questions. We'd like to thank all of you again for tuning in today and asking all these great questions. Again, the contact's on the screen right now. Please contact us if you have additional questions. And thank you very much. We'll sign off.